Ladies, gentlemen, and expeditioners of some ages, a lot of the builds that we talk about for Clair Obscur Expedition 33 have one big main purpose, which is just outputting an absolutely obscene amount of damage so quickly that the enemy never gets a chance to hurt you. And that is a fun thing to do. Absolutely. Really, it gives you a strong power fantasy after playing through the game with a more normal setup, but inarguably when you push the power of a build that far, you're barely even playing the game anymore. You're just taking a victory lap, really, and so some people don't really like doing that so much. But then what other ways can you push builds to the extreme if not with a focus on damage? Well, one answer, of course, is immortality, the ability to never even need to ever parry or dodge, to the point that if Maelle in this setup is at 1 HP and she gets hit for 20,000 damage, as you can see on the screen, she actually goes up to 10,000 health instead of dying. She is genuinely fully immortal to everything I have tested this against. So today we're going to go over a really fun and strong setup that uses Maelle as a main tank for the party, using a fun combination of the Maelle Weapon, which is entirely based around healing and can achieve some pretty nutty things, the healing boon Pictos, which gives healing whenever you apply a buff, and then also a skill that allows Maelle to take damage instead of allies. And so the idea is, even if you never parry or dodge, Maelle can just take damage for the entire party and automatically heal it back up really quickly instead of dying every single time, with one slight caveat, which is that any attack that hits the entire expedition instead of only one party member does not have the damage funneled through Maelle. It only does this for attacks that are specifically targeted at a single person. But again, for everything other than specifically multi-target attacks, nothing else in the game can kill any member of your party, and then even for the big group hitting attacks, Maelle still could never die. And then we are just building as much damage as we can alongside this, of course. You can, of course, build whatever you want beside it, as all it is using a single party slot as an immortal battery, but I'm going to be pairing it here with Sciel's Our Sacrifice skill, which is a setup that we talked about in great detail previously as the way to get Sciel to do absolutely nutty damage. And this happens because it scales its damage partially based on the amount of ally health for it to absorb. And with Maelle's amount of healing output in this setup, that just makes this actually extremely easily repeatable. And of course, if you put enough power into Sciel, she will also just one-shot stuff with this ability, and in my exact setup today, if you want, you can straight up deal even 80 million damage before any enemy gets a chance to attack you, which is enough to one-shot pretty much anything in the game, even in Expert and New Game Plus, and it comes with the fact that you also have an immortal tank party member. This skill, however, is just such a natural synergy with the build that offers as much healing as Maelle can get through this combo, as it lets you use that skill at full power with high frequency. And of course, even with this tanky setup in general, Maelle can also output a pretty large amount of damage herself. That said, let's dive into the main setup on Maelle to begin with, and then I will briefly go over how I'm using the other two party members in case you want to use them this way that I am. As for Maelle, the weapon for this is Maelle. This comes from the main story boss at the end of Old Lumiere in Act 2. If you are past that point, you will have the weapon already, which is the main component that you require to reach near immortality, and then you reach full immortality a bit later on. The first ability on this weapon gives allies 20% health recovery when switching to Virtuose Stance, which is nice in general, but it is worth noting that you can't use the inverted affinity Pictos with the setup as a result, because obviously inverted as a status makes healing damage you, so keep that in mind when just putting on generic damage increases that you wouldn't use that one, which you normally would. At level 10, the weapon applies Shell when your health is above 80%, and then at level 20 you swap to Virtuose Stance when your health falls below 50%. For whatever reason, swapping stances on Maelle also counts in the game's mechanics as gaining a buff. This means it will trigger any effects that will trigger from buffs being gained when Maelle hits 50% health, which is a pretty neat synergy once you see what it's going to enable. Next up we have these skills of importance, and there's only one that is really required for tank mode here, which is Egide, which I'm choosing to pronounce confidently incorrectly. This makes it so we literally will jump in front of allies and take attacks for them for this build where Maelle is already immortal. Aside from that, some other skills that I recommend picking up too are Last Chance, just as a way to both set yourself to Virtuose Stance manually and refill all of your AP as well, as that's quite nice, especially as the 1 HP is not even a negative in this setup because Maelle cannot die. Then I recommend just generic damage choices, so you have them if you want them. Phantom Strike for multi-target is always quite good on Maelle. Stendhal is incredible for single target as well, and the big gradient attack that she has, if you want to spend your gradient charges with Maelle, is great as well. For Pictos and Lumina, the Pictos that I chose specifically are literally just for the purposes of maximizing bonus health as a stat so that we can have an insane sort of maximum health pool on Maelle, which more than anything is just as a fueler for Sciel's damage. But if you aren't using Sciel the way that I am and the skill that I'm using on her, you can just do whatever is efficient, doubling up your Lumina abilities to make it cost less Lumina points. As for the Lumina abilities that we are using here then, the main important ones here are anti-stun, which literally will stop you from being stunned, which is really important, and you can swap this out for anti-freeze depending on the enemy that you are facing, whether they have stun or freeze, as this just makes sure that you don't get locked down permanently on Maelle if she ends up being your last party member alive for whatever reason. Because if you wind up immortal but you're stunned every turn, that doesn't really help anything. Cheater, of course, is incredibly good for bonus turns, as that's just in general fantastic. Effective heal literally doubles all healing that Maelle receives, which is a big part of our sort of immortality loop. Energizing heal is a little bit of AP management for Maelle, as we're going to be healing Verso pretty regularly as well. Then a bunch of energy management just in general, which is relatively standard across most builds. First Strike just makes it so that we can go first in combat before the enemy do, regardless of the speed stat differential, which is especially important because we are not at all focusing speed as a stat on Maelle herself. Healing Boon is a very important one for the setup, but you can't get it until Act 3. Specifically, this is in Maelle's relationship quest zone, the Reacher. This heals for 15% HP when you apply a buff, and so this synergizes with our weapon effect, swapping our stance when we drop under 50% HP for a 15% heal. This is then doubled from effective heal to be a 30% HP heal whenever we drop under half health. Healing Share also gives us 15% of all heals that affect other characters, which is quite good because our weapon will heal Verso for 20% whenever we enter Virtuose Stance, so that's another bit of extra healing when we drop under 50%. Then the main combo piece for this to finish it off is SOS Shell. This applies Shell when we drop under 50% health, when combined with Healing Boon and then effective heal as well, makes it another 30% health regen when we drop under half health. So in total, we are now healing for over 60% health whenever we go under 50% health. And for whatever reason, that specific interaction just results in pure immortality on Maelle. Like, I've not found any situation where she can't die, even being hit while at 1 HP. It does not matter. I can just sit here, not even trying to dodge or parry, on the end boss of the Endless Tower activity, and it can't do anything to me in the slightest. As for the other Luminas that we have here, most of them are just sort of extras, things to increase general damage for Maelle if you want to have damage on her on top of the tank setup itself, but the tank setup is the requirement for what I'm really trying to show you here today. You don't need everything I have by any means, mostly just the stuff I called out specifically. The rest is just a bonus on top. That said, if you're wondering about the low health Luminas that I have equipped as well, like At Death's Door and Critical Moment, these are quite good when they are active, and while they aren't going to always be active, these are for whenever we happen to be on low health. Because we can lose health on Maelle, we just can't ever actually go below 1 HP. So some turns this will be active, some turns it won't, it's just a bonus. As for the attributes I've gone for on Maelle, I've got 99 Might for pure damage scaling, 99 Luck for crit chance, some speed, but mostly for the weapon scaling, and then Vitality for both weapon scaling and to boost our maximum health, which will affect Sciel's damage. The main reason that we are ignoring agility here is because Maelle's role here doesn't actually get more effective with more turn economy. She just sort of does what she does passively after you set it up at the start of combat on the first turn. Unless you let the other characters die, of course, then it does matter a bit, and so if you want to have more speed on her just in case, you can drop out the luck that I've got here and replace it with 99 agility instead, but that is sort of a personal choice. Next up then we have our other character setups too, first with Verso, who I have in a setup that I have used him quite a bit with recently. This is his support setup with some damaging additions to make him be able to pack a bit of a punch himself too. The main thing that we're using him here for though is the Sciel weapon, which increases ally damage from your perfection rank instead of increasing self-perfection rank. This drops from the Chromatic Greatsword Cultist boss in Cyrene, and for skills, none of them are overly important really, as Verso's job here is mostly to apply buffs to allies and debuffs to enemies, but follow up is a really nice option to have on him because this build has a lot of a focus on free aim shots and firing lots of free aim shots because it helps us get to S perfection rank as quickly as possible. This means we are already built to fire 10 or more free aim shots per turn. We are built for AP efficiency, which makes this a really nice turn finisher for a bit of extra damage, and this typically does somewhere between 1 and 2 million damage against most enemies in most situations, which isn't crazy obviously, but that is a nice bit to have on a character you're not using as your main damage. For Luminas and Pictos, again we want to try and bump up our bonus maximum health as an actual stat on the actual Pictos just to fuel Ciel's damage, but if you aren't using Ciel this way, the way that I am, you don't have to think about that so much. For the actual Lumina effects then, Verso fills quite a few roles at the same time. The first being a death buffer. Auto death makes you die at the start of combat, breaking death makes it so that you fill all of the enemy's break bar when you die at the start of combat, burning death makes it so you apply some burn stacks to all enemies when you die at the start of combat, so this then activates all burn synergy bonuses across all of your characters. Protecting death gives you the ability to apply Shell as a buff to allies when you die, and this combined with powerful on Shell, which makes it so when you apply Shell you also apply powerful, and then rush on powerful makes it so that when you apply powerful you also apply rush, so when you die you apply all 3 of these buffs to allies. And on top of that, we have greater rush and greater powerful on Verso as well to make these buffs even more potent. We then have shielding death on Verso as well, so that your allies will gain 3 shield points when you do this, and then of course second chance to make it so that after you've applied all of these buffs and debuffs, you will then revive with full health. The next main important thing here then is free aim shots and being able to do a lot of them. Burning shots over here combined with beneficial contamination gives you the ability to gain up to 2 bonus AP per turn, similar as a combination with rewarding mark and marking shots, which also builds into our free aim synergy to give you more AP within your turn. But this combined even further with energizing shots, which just gives you the chance to generate AP on any free aim shot with no limit per turn, is sort of nuts, especially because we have all of these things being boosted by Energy Master, which increases the amount of AP that you gain by 1 each time that you gain AP, and because these are all frequent gains of small amounts of AP, Energy Master is doing a lot of work in here, and altogether this just gets us a lot of free aim shots to be able to hit S rank lickety-split. We also pair that with the Sniper Lumina effect, which I mainly use as a way of triggering the break effect after filling the bars on death, and then outside of that it's mostly just stuff like some combo attacks to generate AP at the end of the turn, combined with exposing attack, which applies defenseless to the enemy that you use base attack against, and that combined with greater defenseless to increase the potency of that debuff too. And then because my Verso has lots of Lumina points after that, I just built in some stuff to generate lots of gradient charge while doing what we're already doing, and then some more generic damage increases afterwards as well. For Verso's attributes here, 99 agility for the speed stat and weapon scaling, 99 might for damage scaling, and then 99 vitality for weapon scaling and bonus maximum health to fuel Ciel's damage dealing. Finally then, we have Sciel herself, who I'm just using as a damage machine. Her best weapon for this is Moisson, which comes from the chromatic Moissonneur boss on the western side of the Red Island, south of the Crows on the world map, which you can get to in Act 2. This weapon converts all damage to dark damage during Twilight State, increases dark damage with skills by 20%, and also applies a bunch of buffs as well. For skills, there are a few that matter here. The main one is our Sacrifice, which is just a big burst of damage from Sciel. It is our main damaging skill really. This consumes all foretell that is built up on enemies and also absorbs all ally health. This puts your allies down to 1 HP. Normally, that makes this a dangerous skill unless you are doing so much damage you are about to end the fight with it, but of course, in our setup, it adds no risk at all because of the amount of healing on Maelle and the amount of just immortality she has. So that's a pretty neat swap up to how our Sacrifice feels to use. In order to get the most out of the skill then, you will also want to be using Fortune's Fury, which lets you double the amount of damage an ally does on their next turn, and you can also cast this on yourself. So we mostly use this from Sciel on Sciel to just increase her own damage to use our Sacrifice the turn after. That said, there are 2 more important skills here too. Twilight Slash is just a nice, cheap way of building a moon charge to help us build towards Twilight State. Then Searing Bond applies a bunch of foretell stacks to all enemies because we apply burn automatically at the start of combat, or for more single target purposes, you would want to use Spectral Sweep, which is a very, very good way of applying foretell in general. It applies 2 foretell per crit, and you can easily have this be full foretell stacks on on an enemy anytime that you cast it, but only on one target at a time. For Pictos and Lumina, our goal with Sciel is to end up with at least 100% critical rate in total, including our Lumina effects. Otherwise, we're just pumping speed as the stat on our equipped Pictos. For Lumina, nothing else overly special aside from just making sure you have a good amount of AP management, and you specifically want to make sure that you have Confident Fighter in this setup as well, because it means that you can't be healed, which lets you use low health buffs like at Death's Door and Critical Moment through the setup of Auto Death and Survivor, which will automatically put you to 1 health at the very beginning of combat. As otherwise, if you are able to be healed, of course, Maelle will heal you up, which deactivates the buffs. As for the attributes on Sciel, we have 99 agility for the speed, and as our primary weapon stat scaling, we have 99 might for pure weapon damage gain, and then 99 luck for weapon secondary stat scaling, and the crit rate is a nice bonus as well. As for playing the build, the Maelle tank part of it is essentially automatic once you have equipped what I have here. The only thing you need to do is use Igade at the start of combat, and then the fun part is because we apply Sciel to ourselves every time we go under 50% health, which is essentially any time that you get hit, we can have this just sort of last forever off of 1 cast at the start of combat. But to make it clear, you want to keep out an eye for the blue flower petal effect around allies to make sure that it is still active. If there's no blue flower petals, you want to make sure you use the skill again. Otherwise, for Maelle, just use the abilities sort of as standard, but she isn't meant to be your big damager here. If you are using the same setup that I am for my other 2 characters too, Verso's role is to free aim shots all of his AP away on the first turn, then base attack the priority target to apply debuffs, then spam free aim shots on his next turn until you hit S rank perfection, and then you can either just keep doing free aim shots and end up with base attack, or you can do a follow up at the end for some bonus damage. Then on Sciel, your first 2 turns are for entering Twilight phase, which you do by starting with Twilight Slash for a moon charge, then using either Searing Bond if you're against multiple healthy enemies, or Spectral Sweep for a more single target priority, and then on your 3rd turn, you would use Fortune's Fury for the double damage, and 4th turn, our Sacrifice for massive damage output that hits all enemies. On top of this, I have Verso generating loads of Gradient Charge as well, so you can weave in Gradient attacks however you want to make this even better. That just about does it for today then, everyone. Something a little bit different with a build that is fun and optimized, but not built purely to just one-shot everything, while still being so strong that fights become trivial, just in a totally different way. Another way that you could look at this is as a sort of training wheel set up for parry timings, as whether you screw up a parry or not while using Maelle, she won't die. So you can try sort of endlessly to get the timings down and get more use of them on tougher fights. And it's worth mentioning, even if your allies do die, you can always just use a revive tint on them during Maelle's turn, as she's not going to be dying herself. I hope you've all enjoyed this then, and let me know if you want more of this sort of style of build in Expedition 33 moving forwards. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.